Hey, Derek Parsons with Parsons Benefits Coach. It is January 8th, 2026. Just wanted to give everyone a quick update on compliance items that we're working on right now, mainly specific to the 6056 reporting and the 1095s, which are for the 2025 plan year. They're just due in the first part of 2026 for the 2025 plan year. We just had one of our big ACA compliance update webinars yesterday by our ACA counsel, Stacey Barrow, and some minor updates. But in general, 1095 reporting hasn't changed a whole lot. So the things that we're looking at in conversations with employers during renewals, or we're working with new employers, is, do you have any related companies? An employer might say, hey, look, I got 40 employees and I'm not subject to the rules of the Affordable Care Act and the employer mandate. I don't need to do the reporting. But I own this other company and it's just kind of an investment. It's on the side. Well, that company is going to be, the employees in that other company most likely are going to be added to the total employee count of the primary company. So the IRS has come up with challenging rules to navigate and determine whether you are commonly owned or not. But in most cases, if the owner owns multiple businesses, you're going to need to take all those employees and add them together to figure out if you're over the 50 full-time equivalent mark. And just remember that 50 is the magic number that determines whether you're an applicable large employer or not, ALE. If you're not an ALE, you don't have to do reporting. You don't have to have an affordable plan. Doesn't have to be minimum value. There's no penalties. If you are an ALE, there's potential penalties. You have to have an affordable plan. You have to have a minimum value plan. You have to make sure that you're giving it to all of your eligible employees, or you are subject to a potential penalty. So just keep in mind that 226J letters are the penalty letters from the IRS. The IRS is working on 2023 right now, so you can see that they're a little bit behind. And this is nothing new. They've been behind for quite a while. Now just remember that the 226J letters, if you get one, they say you owe money. You have a chance to respond. Those aren't final letters. You have a chance to say, look, we did our homework. We have our worksheets. We don't owe anything. We are compliant. And also, we highly recommend you engaging with some kind of ACA counsel to respond to the IRS on those letters. And a lot of those letters that we've assisted with, they ended up getting reduced substantially, or brought to zero, because the IRS is just using your total W-2s filed for the year, oftentimes, to determine whether you're over the 50 or not. They're not asking you for what's your formula prior to sending that 226J letter out. So hopefully that helps. The other thing to keep in mind is that if you are over 50 full-time equivalent, you need to have a eligibility and tracking system for your employees, mainly in regards to your variable hour employees. So the IRS has said, we're going to give you a formula for your part-time employees to figure out, like, are they over the 30 hour threshold, or are they under? If they're over the 30-hour threshold, then you're subject to potential penalties if you don't offer them insurance. They don't have to pick up the insurance. They don't have to enroll, but they do have to. You do have to offer it to them. And so this is all reflected in your 1095s. So what we don't want to have happen is we don't want to have employees out there that you said, well, they're seasonal. There's no such, once you're in an ALE, there's no such thing as seasonal. You need to be tracking hours, or at least have a policy in place saying, hey, my part-time employees don't work over 30. Okay, we just don't do that. Okay, so you can safely assume that, I don't know if that's politically correct, safely assume, but you can assume that those employees aren't going to trigger any penalties if they don't ever work over 30. If they start working over 30, the easiest thing most employers do is just make them full-time and give them offer of coverage after your normal waiting period. So vendor setup, Just make sure your vendors, if you have a payroll system that's managing your eligibility, that your payroll system is doing it accurately. They have your correct measurement period in place, the correct stability period, and they're also notifying you when these employees should be enrolled in, not enrolled, but offered insurance. Also, when they should be taken off. So if you offer to an employee that's part-time, we typically consider part-time, and they go 12 months, but they're not working the 30 hours, then at what point do you take them off the plan? So make sure that your eligibility system and vendors that you're using that are doing that calculation for you. So the other thing to keep in mind is, make sure that you have a good understanding of your measurement period. I just mentioned that you can have a monthly measurement period, which is kind of like the default if there's no other measurement period available that works. You could potentially have an employee enroll in 1 month and then be kicked off the next month and then enroll the next month based on how many hours they work. So we don't normally see employers using the monthly. It's just if nothing else fits, it's kind of what you can fall back on. Most employers have a 12-month measurement period. You can have a 3-month, you can have a 6-month, I think you can have a 9-month, but most employers use a 12-month measurement period. So keep in mind that if you're an employer that you have, 100 employees for 4 months in the summer, and you're really busy, and they're all working 40, 50 hours a week, but a good chunk of those employees get laid off in October, then those employees could be variable hour, which means that you can take up 12 months to measure their time and determine if they're averaging over the 30 hours or not. Remember that also affects, if you ever get a penalty letter from the IRS, that affects who you potentially could owe penalties on, because if they were never eligible, then there's no penalties assessed. So the other thing to keep in mind is on your 1095s, when you're putting these together, the most important line on your 1095s is line 16. Line 16 is the don't penalize me line. That is a line that is the most important line. You do not want to see blank boxes in line 16. So just remember to proof and audit your own 1095s, and just be looking for line 16 boxes that are blank. If there's a blank box, you need to start asking questions. Is this accurate? What's the code that should be in there? Was there a mistake? And more, I would say 9 out of 10 times, there's some kind of mistake made, or the code didn't get put in that should have been put in. So it's a very important line to look at. So full-time versus part-time guidelines. Are you transitioning employees correctly from full-time to part-time? That's also another very important area. The IRS has said that if you you do have penalty exposure if you have a full-time employee that maybe drops hours from 40 hours a week down to 25. And you're like, well, shoot, this employee isn't eligible anymore for insurance. What do I do? So you do have, I think it's 3 months of exposure for penalties if you COBRA them, and then they go to the exchange and they get a subsidy. You are subject to penalties for 3 months. I have to double check the details. But I think that most of our employers choose to cover some of their COBRA premiums for those 3 months, so they're not subject to a penalty. It doesn't come up very often, but it's something to be aware of, that full-time employees dropping to part-time, there is a special way to report on them. And then carrier compliance. So that's another area that we've seen some challenges. If you are in if you are a large employer, applicable large employer, but you're still in a small group market product with the carriers, a lot of times the small group market carrier service teams will not abide by the federal rules. So you have a decision on whether you follow federal law, part of ACA, in when you are to offer your employees coverage or not, or do you follow state law? And and not offer them insurance when they're not eligible and working 30 hours or more, but then subject yourself to penalties on the federal level. So for example, you have an employee, you change carriers in January, and you have an employee that's only working 10 hours a week because it's the slow season. But this employee has averaged over 30 hours during their measurement period and is technically eligible for insurance. So you go to change carriers, the carrier asks you for your quarterly payroll report, and they see that this employee is not working minimum wage and minimum hours, because they use minimum wage typically. And so that the carrier says, hey, this employee isn't eligible. And you're like, well, no, they are. We've done our calculations. They're a variable hour employee. A lot of times you see the carriers in the small group market that they will refuse to follow the federal guidelines. And it's just, there's no easy answer, but something that you should put some thought into and how you want to address it. It doesn't come up very often, but when it does come up, it can be very frustrating. So hopefully that helps. Start your audit now. Look at your plan. Look at your 1095s that are being produced for you if you're not doing them yourself. Look at line 16, and it's just going to help you tremendously down the road if you ever, number one, avoiding a 226J letter, but also if you get a 226J letter, then you kind of know, you're like, look, we were doing things right. We just need to figure out how to respond. So hopefully that helps. Derek Parsons, Parsons Benefits Coach, and here's to a great start of 2026.